In 2023, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, for 30 minutes.
Speaker. I thank my friend from Arizona for his willingness to come to the floor and talk about these important issues that, frankly, all of us should be talking about. And he does so with regularity, and it's important. The average American is hurting because they watch price of goods going up and all the things that are happening. It's a direct consequence of what we're doing and not doing here. As the gentleman points out, our inability and lack of willingness or fortitude to focus on the issues that matter. But right now, I think something the American people need to understand as we head into the fall season, and we're heading into the time of elections. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle come down and give a whole lot of rhetoric about the lack of agenda or lack of things that we're doing. And we have legislation on the floor of the House this week to ensure that only citizens vote, something we call the SAVE Act. Now, that legislation is necessary because anybody with eyes knows that we're getting overrun by open borders that are endangering the American people, and you've got millions of people flooding into the country, and you've got thousands and thousands of people who are on the voter rolls who are not supposed to be. Those are facts. It's true. We know states that are starting to cleanse their voter rolls and are finding people who are non-citizens who are registered to vote. We saw it in Virginia. We've seen it in North Carolina. We've seen it in Texas. We've seen it across the country. But the truth is, it goes far deeper than that. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, what does it mean to be an American? What does citizenship even mean anymore? We have an administration, Joe Biden, and the people who work for him and our Democratic colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are at war with the whole idea of American exceptionalism and what it means to be an American, and at war with the whole idea of what it means to be an American citizen. They're undermining the whole purpose, the whole intent behind citizenship. Citizenship is supposed to matter. But this week, we're going to be voting on the floor on a bill to require a simple thing, that we know that only American citizens are voting in our American elections. That's what we're voting on this week, tomorrow. Now, you would think that some number of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would be willing to work with us on such legislation. They bemoan that they're not getting an amendment offered. Well, let's be very clear. They offered one amendment, one, in the Committee of Jurisdiction, the House Admin Committee. You know how many Democrats were present? One, the ranking member. The ranking member offered the amendment. It went down 6-1. There was no real debate from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle because the only purpose of the amendment was to gut the bill. That was the only purpose. And then I heard bemoaning by our Democratic colleagues and the ranking member of the Rules Committee when we were up in the Rules Committee. And he said, well, we should be able to offer this amendment. Why? Your Democratic colleagues didn't even show up to the debate in the committee. And the whole purpose of the amendment is to gut the bill. Now, the bill, which has been strongly supported by the Speaker on down, strongly supported by his staff, strongly supported by the people who have worked on it hard, but none of that matters to the American people. The only thing that matters to the American people is it is legislation that would protect their constitutional right as a citizen to be the one who has a say in his or her government. Because what's happening right now is we are undermining the integrity of our elections and undermining our very republic by allowing non-citizens to vote. And indeed, some jurisdictions, Oakland, San Francisco, New York, indeed our nation's capital, is purposely or are purposely registering non-citizens to vote. Now they say, wink, wink, nod, nod, don't worry about it. We're only going to do that in state and local elections. We will not, of course, put them over in federal elections because that's against the law. Because my Democratic colleagues want to say, hey, you guys don't need this bill. It's already against the law for a non-citizen to vote in federal elections. True. However, number one, then what are you worried about? Why are you concerned? What's so problematic that you think it's bad that we try to put procedures in place to carry out the law you say is already in place? The truth is, you don't like that that law is in place. That's the truth about our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We know this because Democratic jurisdictions across the country, as I said a minute ago, are registering non-citizens to vote in state and local elections. They want them to vote in federal elections. The problem is they have this pesky little issue with the American people, 81 to 87% of whom believe that only citizens should vote in American elections. Only American citizens should vote. So we have a bill before us on the floor of the House tomorrow that I believe is going to be opposed by virtually all or all of our Democratic colleagues. We'll see. I kind of dare them. To vote no on a bill supported by 81 to 87% of the American people. I dare them to vote no against a bill that says that only citizens, American citizens, should vote in American elections. Kind of dare them to go ahead and follow a president who has put out a policy against a bill, the purpose of which is to guarantee citizens are the ones who get to vote in American elections. We'll see. We'll see if our Democratic colleagues want to go to the polls in November, having rejected what clearly the vast majority of their constituents, even in the most liberal jurisdictions in the country, believe is right. But that's what's likely to occur tomorrow if you believe the news and you believe the accounts and you look at what the president's done and you look at the posturing of the House Democratic leadership. They are on the precipice of staking out a position of belief that non-citizens should be able to vote in our elections. That, of course, is not too surprising, given the extent to which a number of our Democratic colleagues have repeatedly talked about how it is beneficial for them to have non-citizens, indeed sometimes illegal aliens, voting in elections. Fact of the matter is, we know what has happened under the Biden administration as the American people have been endangered, as Americans have died, as Laken Riley has died, as numerous individuals have been killed, raped, murdered, assaulted across this country by people who have let out in this country illegally. We know that some 8 million illegal aliens have crossed the border under Biden's tenure. We know that some 5.3 million illegal aliens have been released by Joe Biden. We know that we've had massive numbers of criminal gang members, massive numbers of people affiliated with terrorist organizations. We know that we've had massive thousands of numbers of Chinese nationals who've come into our country. We know that our domestic crime is increasing. We know that we're being endangered. We know that people are being released. We know that we have criminals coming to our country. And yet we want to do one simple thing. We want to do one simple thing. We've been fighting them and trying to stop what they're doing, releasing people into the country. It passed H.R. 2. Democrats refuse to do anything about it. They refuse to move it. Chuck Schumer refuses to do it. Joe Biden doesn't even know what we're talking about. And here, our Democratic colleagues are poised to reject a bill to protect our elections, to ensure that only Americans vote in our elections. That should give everybody in this country pause and give them a glimpse into the soul of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and what they think about citizenship. They don't respect citizenship. Our Democratic colleagues don't believe that citizenship matters. They don't believe that sovereignty matters. Because if you did, you wouldn't do this. If our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, if our Democratic colleagues had some small fix or even significant fix to believe that we could make our system better, we'd be all ears. If it was a legitimate exercise to say, yes, of course, we want to not only have it against the law for non-citizens to vote in our elections, as is currently the case. We want to make sure that we remove all federal barriers and indeed improve the situation and have requirements in place to guarantee that we can check and know and ensure that only citizens vote. But that's not what they're doing. The legislation that we put forward is pretty simple, the SAVE Act. It'll allow you to come forward prospectively. If you are going to vote this fall, you can go vote. You're in the system. But something changes, you move your address, you get married, something changes. At some point over the next few years, we require states to clean their voter rolls. But you go forward, you go want to register to vote, take a passport, take a military ID, take a real ID, all of which demonstrate your citizenship. If you don't have one of those, take your regular driver's license, get a copy of your birth certificate, get a copy of a adoption certificate or naturalization papers, go down, hey, I can register, I'm a citizen. There are 400,000 tombstones across the other side of the Potomac River who either gave the last full measure of devotion or risked the last full measure of devotion. I think you can take a few seconds to make sure that you demonstrate your citizenship to vote. But more than that, we put in massive safeguards. We give flexibility to states. We say, hey, if you want to do it and you come up with a better way to do it, you can bounce and check the federal systems. You can sign an affidavit as a government official saying, hey, we believe this is a citizen. We checked this is a citizen. They provided all the information necessary. Great. There are no barriers, no undue burdens, no restrictions on an ability of an American citizen to go and vote under our plan. What it will do is give not just increased confidence, but a return of belief, a belief in our system, a belief that they can actually trust elections, a belief that it is in fact their country. Because shouldn't we want this to be our country? Shouldn't we want to be proud and say, this is our country, these are our rules, you are welcome to come here under the terms of our invitation only, and you are going to follow the rules. And criminals are not going to be allowed here. And you're not going to be allowed to carry out criminal activities. You're not going to be allowed to murder, rape, and maim and steal. But if you're coming here and you're hardworking and you follow our rules, God bless you, come on in. But you're going to vote only if you're a citizen. The fact that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't want to guarantee that tells you everything you need to know. It gives up the whole game. It gives up the fact that our colleagues don't want sovereignty. They don't want that security. And that's the truth. There's a reason our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to continue to throw blanket money at international organizations. Want to send endless supply of funds, blank checks to the United Nations, to the World Health Organization, to all of the NGOs that are funneling people into our country, endangering our own citizens, putting children into the sex trafficking trade. All of that is being done on purpose. All of that is being done because our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want it all to occur. There is no other explanation for it. I'm tired. I've been sitting here and watching for my entire time in Congress and watching this president, to the extent he even knows where the hell he is, destroy this country and endanger the people that I represent. Destroy and endanger Texas. That's what's happened. Nothing less. The President of the United States and the people who work for him have endangered our country. The Secretary of Homeland Security has endangered our country. Ask the now probably thousands, certainly hundreds of parents who are sitting there having lost loved ones, murdered, killed, or raped, or maimed, the tens of thousands of parents who have lost their kids to fentanyl poisoning. Ask any of them. Ask the cops. Ask the Border Patrol who want to do their job and are being told they can't and being accused of whipping Haitian migrants. That's what's happening. And here we are again. We're not even talking about securing the border in this bill. We're not talking about doing the things we should be doing as a sovereign nation. We're talking about doing the simplest thing if you're a sovereign nation, and that is ensure the integrity of your elections and that only citizens can vote. So I'm proud of what the job the Republican Party has done and my Republican colleagues have done and the Speaker of the House has done in putting forward legislation that will solve the problem, that follows the law, defers where appropriate to states, sets a federal standard where it's appropriate with respect to federal elections only, follows the constitutional parameters, lays it all out in a way to protect our elections. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to protect our country. We are, in fact, the guardians of our country. We sit in this hallowed chamber. What on earth are we supposed to do but do the work of protecting the country? Which leads me to another point. Our country is in danger right now because the President of the United States no longer has the mental capacity to carry out the powers and the duties of the office. I get no great joy in saying that. It's true. It is appalling to watch the news media and my Democratic colleagues in this chamber, in the Senate, in the administration, ignore the reality of the state of the president's mental acuity, endangering the American people, and now suddenly wake up because there's an election in a few months. Suddenly go, oh, we need to do something about this. Why? Because there's an election in a few months. And even at that, unwilling to call the question. I would posit that they're unwilling to call the question because my Democratic colleagues, because the Democrats in the White House, indeed the First Lady, the Vice President of the United States, are all complicit. Are all complicit in covering up the lack of mental ability of the president, covering up the health, the mental health, the physical health of the president. And by doing this, they are endangering the American people. And indeed, they are unconstitutionally calling for president by committee. I heard the former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson. I've heard numerous current administration staffers. I've heard numerous Democratic colleagues in the House and the Senate talk about how, don't worry, the president has some good people around him. Don't worry. There's a lot of really good people that are advising him. There's committees of people. First of all, I'm not blown away by the quality of the people surrounding the president. Second of all, that's not how it works. The founders firmly rejected, from memory, I think it's Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 70, firmly rejected the notion of president by committee, that it would endanger us, that you needed an executive, you needed a commander-in-chief to make the decisions. And a brief note to my colleagues on this side of the aisle who are saying, well, Chip, shh, don't say anything. Don't bring it up. We're in election season. They're falling on their own sword. They're blowing up. Let them blow up. What I'm concerned about blowing up is our country. If we're attacked and we have a president in the White House who can't respond, that job is not just from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This matters. It matters that the President of the United States is at best questionable to make decisions when it matters. It is why the 25th Amendment exists, which of course requires the Vice President to take action, which I do not believe the Vice President will do, because the Vice President knows she is complicit in having hid from the American people the mental state of the President of the United States for years. This is not a political statement. As I've just noted, some people on my side of the aisle would rather I not say it. Shh. Let's just get to November. I just want our country to get to November. I want our country to get to December. I want our country to get to the next century. And when the President of the United States can't carry out the powers and the duties of the office without a committee of staff around him, when the press secretary of the White House today literally answered the question when asked by a reporter what would happen at 11 p.m. if nuclear weapons were fired at the United States? And her answer was, well, there's some really good people around him that would come and talk to him. That gives me a lot of pause. All of us who are in elected office have advisors, people we trust. Seek their advice, seek their counsel, but I can promise you, when you know what hits the fan, if I got to come down here and make a decision, I walk down here and make a decision. Because that's what we're hired to do. When you got to vote, you got to vote. When you got to come down and take action, you got to take action. And the President of the United States is uniquely in that position. The fact of the matter is, this administration has been being propped up, effectively a Manchurian candidate, being propped up with committees of people around the president, hiding and obfuscating the truth, making decisions that frankly should give all of us pause. And it's no wonder that the country is in such bad shape at the moment. Our country is being impoverished by the day. The Bureau of Labor Statistics found over the last year almost 1 million native-born Americans lost jobs on net. Americans are spending over $12,800 more annually to buy the basics because of the inflation under this administration. Mortgage rates are up to 7%. Housing affordability has plummeted to record lows. Gasoline up 55%, eggs up 40%, flour up 35%. Electricity's up 29%, baby food's up 29%, breakfast cereals up 25%. Bread is up 25%, chicken and poultry up 25%. Lunch meat's up 24%. Eating out is up 23%. Rent is up 21%. Used cars up 20%. Americans have lost over $4,400 paying higher energy costs under the president. The Biden administration announced they paused all non-FTA export permit applications for liquefied natural gas. What do you think that does? It doesn't help us. We're involved in endless conflicts, funding them. Nobody in this chamber wants Ukraine to lose to Russia, but nobody in this chamber wants to continue to fund a perpetual war by an administration that is out of touch while the American people are suffering. Biden has sold off more than 40% of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and in 2023, stockpile at the SPR plunged to 40-year lows. The fact of the matter is, this administration is failing the American people. Republicans have, for the last 18 months in this Congress for sure, if not the duration of the Biden administration, but certainly the last 18 months, been putting forward responsible, strong policies that the President of the United States and my Democratic colleagues are rejecting. We have worked hard to put forward the Limit, Save, Grow, which would have dramatically turned around the economic situation, dramatically reduced spending, dramatically reduced the size of the bureaucracy, dramatically improved our energy prices and competition around the globe, which, by the way, would have had an impact in Ukraine, which would have helped us push back on Russia. We passed responsible appropriations bills. We got caps enacted and put in place. The defense bill is funded. The increase in defense spending is funded out of taking cuts out of the IRS expansion that Democrats wanted to foist on hardworking Americans and took money out of remaining COVID funds. Non-defense was then held flat. We passed H.R. 2, a responsible border security bill, which would have ended the releases of people into the United States. It would have tightened down on parole and asylum. It would have ended the releases of unaccompanied children. It would have treated them responsibly. It would have reduced the power of cartels. It would have reduced sex trafficking. And it would have kept people like Lake and Riley alive. We did that. We passed H.R. 2. Our Democratic colleagues opposed it. They opposed it in the Senate, and they opposed it here. This Republican conference has passed appropriation bill after appropriation bill to be rejected by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We have passed thousands of amendments. We passed 7 appropriations bills last year. We've passed the number of appropriations bills this year, and we're continuing to pass them. We're doing the work the American people sent us here to do with zero help from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And frankly, I'm proud of the work that we've been putting forward that's been being rejected by our Democratic colleagues. I haven't always agreed. I've been very clear on this floor. You got to deliver results. You got to get some things across the finish line. You got to be willing to hold the line and fight and use the power of the purse. There's more that we can do. But make no mistake about it. We have been putting forward good bills to make our economy stronger. We would have driven down, if our legislation had been adopted by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and the president, inflation would be down, the border would be secure, people would be enjoying much more affordable energy, job creation would be up, people's lives and quality of lives would be better, more Americans would be secure on the streets. And today, this week, we have on the floor a bill that would protect voting and ensure that only citizens vote. And again, if our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would work with us, we could do that. We could restore belief in our system. These are all the things that we've been working on, working to try to do. And right now, our Democratic colleagues are wrapped around the axle trying to figure out what to do about their president. Because with all due respect, they're not putting America first. The President of the United States right now is not putting America first. The Vice President of the United States is not putting America first. The Cabinet is not putting America first. Because if you were going to put America first, if you were going to put Americans first, then you would call it like you see it. You would act. You would lead. You would do what everyone in America knows needs to be done. Everyone with eyes who have been watching the president. And again, I take no joy in saying it. He is our president. I disagree with him a lot. But he is our president. And the President of the United States needs to be strong and coherent and capable and able to lead in an increasingly dangerous world. And notwithstanding the horrible policies that have been promoted and pushed by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, can we not just agree that the President of the United States should be mentally aware and competent to carry out the powers and duties of the office? Will our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and in the administration not look at this the way every American is seeing this right now? Even the most politically biased people in the media and around the country are looking at this and throwing their hands up and saying, what's going on? Admittedly, it's because they're panicking about the elections in November, when what it should be is that they're panicked about the state of our country and whether or not we can be safe and secure. In the book of Acts, it is noted that Paul was a Roman citizen. The Roman authorities put him in chains and were about to flog him without a trial. But when he said that he was born a citizen, they let him go. Even though he was spreading the message of a hated and distrusted religious minority, but citizenship meant a great deal. One of the things that eventually led to the downfall of the Roman Empire was the fact that over the next few centuries after that, citizenship meant less and less and less, until it meant almost nothing, and its people no longer knew how to preserve the civilization their ancestors had built. We cannot let the same thing happen here. Citizenship matters. Being a citizen of this country matters. It matters in observing the White House. It matters in citizens voting in elections. It matters in the policies we put forward to put the American people first. Citizenship has to matter again. With that, I yield back.
Yields. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personal